Welcome everybody. Today's chapter 28, is called Between the Old and New Testaments. The good news is that by the time we get to Lent on Wednesday, we're going to move into the New Testament, so I hope you've enjoyed the journey so far. In a normal copy of the Authorised Version of 1611, which is the Bible that most people have in their homes, we turn the page from the last chapter of the Old Testament, the book of Malachi, to the first chapter of the New Testament, in the Gospel according to St. Matthew. Some editions of the Revised Version of 1885, and in more recent times the New English Bible, have a section in between called the Apocrypha, and sometimes the Apocrypha are printed as a separate book. Protestant readers of the Roman Catholic English translation called the Jerusalem Bible find no section labelled Apocrypha, but instead various books whose names are perhaps unfamiliar, cropping up at different points in the Old Testament. What's the explanation for all of this? The Old Testament was written largely in Hebrew, but as time went on this became a dead language for ordinary people, and was replaced in Palestine by Aramaic, which was the spoken language in the time of Jesus. The Hebrew version was still used in the synagogues as being the original sacred language in which the law and the prophets had been written. But an Aramaic translation was always given, and the sermon was in the language of the day. By the end of Old Testament times, however, there were far more Jews living outside Palestine than inside it, and for ordinary purposes they spoke Greek, which was then the international language throughout the civilized world. About 250 BC, it was felt that a Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures should be made, for the benefit of Jews living overseas who were no longer familiar with their ancient tongue. The largest colony of Jews living outside Palestine was in Alexandria in Egypt, and it was here that the Greek translation known as the Septuagint first appeared. The Old Testament as we know it had been built up over the centuries, but it was never finally decided either inside or outside Palestine what should be included in it until AD 90. By this time, the Romans had overrun Palestine, Jerusalem with its temple had been destroyed, and the Jews had lost their ancestral home. Moreover, Christianity was emerging as a distinct religion, so it was imperative that a decision should be reached as to what constituted the sacred writings of the Jews. At the Synod of Jamnia in AD 90, the leaders of the Jewish community fixed the contents of the Old Testament as we know them in our Authorised Version. There was a difference of opinion about some books, for obvious reasons. For example, Ecclesiastes because of its sceptical tone, and Esther because of its bloodthirsty character. But finally the decision was taken in their favour. Some other books, however, were left out. These were religious writings which had become popular amongst Greek-speaking Jews, and which they regarded as part of the sacred scriptures, but which, largely because they were considered modern, in inverted commas, were treated with reserve by the more conservative Palestine rabbis. It was decided to group these in a class by themselves and to call them the Apocrypha, meaning hidden, in the sense of being withdrawn from public use and not included in the regular services in the synagogues. The Greek Septuagint, however, contained them, and it was this that became the Old Testament of the early Christian Church. When Latin succeeded Greek as the world language, the Old Testament part of the Vulgate, as the Latin translation of the Bible was called, included these extra books, just as the Septuagint had done. The Roman Catholic Jerusalem Bible of today, although it's a fresh translation from the original languages, keeps the Apocrypha not as a separate section, but interspersed with the other books of the Old Testament as it was in the Vulgate. At the Reformation, the Protestants decided to follow the more conservative line of the Jewish rabbis at Jamnia and relegated the Apocrypha as a kind of appendix to the Old Testament. There is some difference of attitude and practice amongst the various Reformed churches, but by and large the Apocrypha are not treated as being on the same level of importance as the Old Testament. Most people would, however, agree that the great words which are read in churches on national occasions, beginning, "Let us now praise famous men," and which come from the Apocrypha, are considerably more significant for Christians than some of the dreary stretches of Leviticus, and the same could be said of many other passages besides. The contents of the Apocrypha are as varied as the Old Testament itself. There are 14 items in all, some being complete books, some merely additions to existing Old Testament books, such as Daniel and Esther. History, poetry, wisdom writings, prayers, and some excellent short stories are included in this littler known part of the Bible, which forms a bridge between the Old Testament and the New. As it happens, the writers of the New Testament books do not quote from the Apocrypha as they do from the Old Testament. But on the other hand, Jesus and the apostles must have known and read these books as part of their religious upbringing. They would read there in the 2 books of the Maccabees the stirring story of the revolt of the Jews against the attack on their cherished faith and traditions by Antiochus IV, which provoked the book of Daniel. Judas Maccabeus is the hero of the story, as Antiochus is the villain. It is indeed only here that the dark tunnel of Jewish history from the days of Nehemiah and Ezra bursts into broad daylight. Here is the story of the valiant struggle of the Maccabees against the oppressor, the restoration of religious liberty, and the establishment once again of an independent Jewish state for the first time since the fall of Jerusalem and the Babylonian exile. 2 splendid wisdom books, Ecclesiasticus and the Book of Wisdom, belong to the same class as Proverbs, Ecclesiastes and Job. Much of Ecclesiasticus reminds us of the Book of Proverbs, but the immortal words of its great hymn of commemoration must be quoted. Let us now praise famous men and our fathers that begat us. The Lord hath wrought great glory by them through his great power from the beginning. Such as did bear rule in their kingdoms, men renowned for their power, giving counsel by their understanding and declaring prophecies. Leaders of the people by their counsels and by their knowledge of learning, meet for the people, wise and eloquent in their instructions. Such as found out musical tunes and recited verses in writing. Rich men furnished with ability, living peaceably in their habitations. All these were honoured in their generations and were the glory of their times. There be of them that have left a name behind them, that their praises might be reported. And some there be which have no memorial, who are perished as though they had never been, and are become as though they had never been born, and their children after them. But these were merciful men, whose righteousness hath not been forgotten. With their seed shall continually remain a good inheritance, and their children are within the covenant. Their seed standeth fast, and their children for their sakes. Their seed shall remain for ever, and their glory shall not be blotted out. Their bodies are buried in peace, but their name liveth for evermore. Ecclesiasticus chapter 44. The Book of Wisdom, which was universally popular in the early Christian church, contains some of the finest writings in the whole Bible. Unlike some of his more bigoted countrymen, the author is a Jew who recognises that God has also spoken to men through the pagan philosophers. As St. Paul was to do at a later date, he sees the minds of the Greek thinkers reaching out towards the truth that God has revealed in Israel. Wisdom is for him the highest activity of the human spirit, akin to the wisdom of God, so that a man who possesses it has something of God within him, which lifts him above the changes and the chances of life. In a great passage, he refutes the sombre view of Ecclesiastes that death is the end of all human effort, good and bad alike. Wisdom chapter 3. But the souls of the righteous are in the hands of God, and there shall no torment touch them. In the sight of the unwise they seem to die, and their departure is taken for misery, and their going from us to be utter destruction. But they are in peace. For though they be punished in the sight of men, yet is their hope full of immortality. And having been a little chastised, they shall be greatly rewarded, for God proved them and found them worthy for himself. They that put their trust in him shall understand the truth, and such as be faithful in love shall abide with him. For grace and mercy is to his saints, and he hath care for his elect. People who are familiar with the Anglican order for morning prayer will know that the splendid canticle which begins, O all ye works of the Lord, bless ye the Lord, and is generally known as the Benedicite, comes from the Apocrypha. But mostly this collection of borderline writings is known for its lively short stories. On the whole, they have more entertainment value than religious value. Among the additions to the book of Daniel, which include the Benedicite, is the famous story of Susanna and the elders, which tells how Daniel outwits two nasty old men who try to seduce the virtuous Susanna. His skill in cross-examination gives rise to Shylock's famous words about a Daniel come to judgment. There's also an amusing piece of folklore in the tale of how Daniel was too smart for the priests of the Babylonian god Bel, and how he coped with a sacred serpent. This is described as the history of the destruction of Bel and the dragon, and includes the story of how Daniel is visited in the lion's den by an airborne prophet who flies in from Palestine with some dinner for him. The heroine of the story of Judith and Holofernes, which was highly popular with classical painters, is a more estimable character than Esther. She rescues her beleaguered townsman by tricking the general of a besieging army. When he thinks he has her in his clutches, he gets hopelessly drunk, whereupon Judith cuts off his head. The enemy is routed, and Judith becomes the toast of her people. It's a gripping tale, skillfully told, illustrating with its strongly nationalist temper its stress on meticulous observance of the law and its hatred of Gentile oppression. The trend of popular Jewish thought at the dawn of the Christian era. Its saving grace, unlike the story of Esther, is its intensely religious emphasis. Another side of the Jewish legacy is reflected in the equally fanciful story of Tobit, more popularly known to playgoers under the title of Tobias and the Angel. In contrast to the military atmosphere of Judith, which like the book of Daniel would have an inspiring message for a nation fighting for its independence from a powerful oppressor, as was the case in the Maccabean War, this little tale of domestic life, with its stress on family loyalty, neighbourly charity and simple piety, points forward to the type of ordinary Jewish homes in the time of Jesus, of which that of Joseph and Mary at Nazareth would only be one among countless others. The details of the story are delightfully far-fetched and amusing. A girl whose 7 bridegrooms have been killed by a demon on their wedding night, a great fish that sounds like the Loch Ness Monster, and a highly resourceful angel in disguise. But kindly old Tobit and his wife, his son Tobias, who sets out on a journey with his dog, and with the help of Raphael, his ingenious but mysterious travelling companion, breaks the wicked demon's spell, and comes back in triumph with a wife as the 8th and only surviving bridegroom. All contribute to leave us with an impression less of fantasy and more of the splendid people who feature in the story, which is presumably what the author intended.